Jason Statham walked into the VIP Skybox at SoFi Stadium wearing jeans and a plain jacket. Within minutes, a billionaire CEO humiliated him in front of the entire room. Mocked him, laughed at him, even poured wine on his chest. They thought he didn't belong. But 5 minutes later, he made them all regret it. Stay with this story until the end, because what happens next will make you rethink everything you believe about strength, silence, and what it truly means to be a man. Jason Statham stepped into the SoFi Stadium VIP Skybox wearing a plain black jacket and dark jeans. Nothing flashy, nothing loud. The glass doors slid behind him without fanfare, just a soft hiss that no one even noticed over the clinking of crystal and curated laughter. In a room glowing with wealth and performance, he moved like someone who didn't need to perform. No assistant, no security detail, no badge dangling from a branded lanyard. He wasn't checking his phone. He wasn't filming. He just looked present. The lounge was crowded with people who weren't used to being ignored. Billionaire founders, ex-athletes with designer smiles, influencers pretending not to record. Everyone watched everyone else, not to connect, but to confirm status. And Jason, walking calmly across the polished floors, didn't give them what they needed. He didn't signal importance, he didn't broadcast relevance, so they dismissed him instantly. Someone whispered that he looked like security. Someone else thought he might be a driver. His clothes were too normal, his walk too grounded, his silence too self-contained. He didn't fit the script they were used to. He made his way to the far side of the lounge, to a leather chair near the glass overlooking the field. The game hadn't started. The crowd outside was still finding their seats. Inside, champagne was flowing like it had something to prove. Jason sat down, elbows on knees, eyes on the pre-game warm-ups happening below. He didn't touch the drink menu. He didn't acknowledge the glances. His stillness made people uncomfortable in a space where everyone was trying too hard. Across the room, Ryan Foster had already noticed him. Mid-40s, tech CEO, venture capitalist turned personal brand, dressed in an aggressively casual blazer that cost more than most people's rent. Ryan didn't just own a company, he owned the attention of the room. People laughed a little too hard at his jokes, nodded a little too fast when he spoke. He thrived on performance, and Jason's refusal to play was a threat. He pointed at him with his drink, quietly at first, then louder. A murmur passed through his circle, fueled by mockery disguised as curiosity. Ryan made a bet, loud enough for his friends to hear, that Jason was either a hired bodyguard or someone who snuck in with fake credentials. Either way, he said, he didn't belong there. People began to glance, then stare. Jason kept his eyes forward, no tension in his shoulders, no need to defend himself. Ryan stood and walked across the room slowly, deliberately. On the way, he made a show of greeting other guests, the kind of man who shook hands without looking at the person he touched. As he passed by a tray of hors d'oeuvres, he accidentally nudged it with his elbow, sending crackers and toothpicks scattering to the ground. He paused, turned, and looked at Jason with a smirk that said everything. Jason leaned forward, picked up the pieces one by one, and placed them gently into a nearby napkin. No one offered to help. No one stopped Ryan. A few phones came out. A few quiet laughs slipped through forced smiles. The air felt thicker. Then Ryan, still grinning, raised his glass and toasted hospitality to no one in particular. He turned and walked back to his group. Jason didn't follow. He didn't flinch. He just returned to his seat. The laughter started to slow. Something about the moment wasn't funny anymore, but Ryan didn't notice. Or maybe he didn't care. He leaned over and whispered something to one of his friends, who scribbled quickly on a sticky note. Within seconds, the note was pressed to Jason's back as Ryan passed behind him again. Light and quiet like a coward always is when trying to feel powerful. The note read, "Ask me about my fake VIP tickets. Jason didn't move. The note fluttered on his jacket, catching the breeze of the overhead fan. Cameras flashed again. A few posts hit social media in real time. The comments poured in. People online laughed too, never knowing who they were looking at. Not seeing the man, just the moment. Jason remained still, his face unreadable. The sound of silverware and laughter swirled around him like static. He let it sit. Let them bury themselves deeper. Ryan wasn't done. He stood again, like a performer stepping back on stage. He grabbed a new glass of red wine from a passing tray and made his way back toward Jason with exaggerated confidence. He raised the glass in mock respect, then let it tip forward, slow, deliberate, a splash of red cutting across the black of Jason's jacket, like an insult made liquid. Gasps followed. Phones lifted again. Even those who hadn't paid attention before now leaned in. Jason looked down at the stain, then up, for the first time. Not in anger, not in shame, but with the kind of calm that unsettles people who mistake loudness for strength. He took a napkin, pressed it gently to his chest, and cleaned the wine with slow, precise movements. The room fell into an uneasy silence, like everyone suddenly remembered their own capacity for cruelty. Ryan raised his eyebrows, mock surprised. He shrugged, like it had all been a harmless joke. Jason stood. The weight of the silence moved with him. He stepped away from his chair, not in a rush, just with purpose. He walked to the edge of the lounge, near the entrance. A security guard stood there. Jason leaned in, whispered something only the guard could hear, then turned and walked back to his seat. People exchanged confused looks. Whispers rippled through the room like nervous static. And then the speakers crackled. A voice came through, calm, professional, but firm. Attention. Please be advised, a high-security guest of national significance is currently present in the lounge. Stand by for protocol update. Jason sat, the note still on his back, the wine still fresh on his chest, the silence now total. Then came footsteps, slow, measured, purposeful. From just outside the door, someone was approaching. And as the doors began to open, one deliberate inch at a time, every person in the room turned to face them, hearts pounding, eyes wide, unknowingly moments away from realizing they had just humiliated the wrong man. The doors opened slowly, revealing nothing at first but polished shoes and a sharp crease in a tailored military coat. Then the figure stepped into the light. Broad shoulders, silver trim on dark blue, ribbons pinned with quiet pride. His presence hit the room like gravity. No music, no announcement. Just wait. He scanned the room with the calm detachment of someone used to evaluating threats and reading rooms in seconds. His name wasn't needed. The uniform said enough. A retired general. Decorated, respected, unshakable. And he walked straight toward Jason, no detour, no hesitation, past influencers frozen mid-laugh, past executives suddenly adjusting their collars. His boots didn't rush, but they didn't wander either. Each step was deliberate, the kind of walk that tells the room, I'm not here to mingle, I'm here for a reason. Jason stood as the man approached, and for the first time all night someone reached out to him, not to mock, not to ridicule, but to salute. A quiet, formal embrace followed, not showy, just real, the kind shared between men who've seen things and survived them. The general said something quietly into Jason's ear. Jason nodded once. Then the general turned to the room. His voice wasn't loud, but it didn't need to be. It carried the kind of force that demanded silence without asking for it. He addressed no one and everyone at once. The tension tightened. He said Jason's name, full name, rank included. Sergeant Honorary Jason Statham, British Special Boat Service, decorated operative, international defense liaison, private donor to over 30 military recovery programs. one of the few civilians to embed voluntarily in an active war zone during medical supply shortages. You could hear breathing shift. Suddenly, the man in jeans and a jacket wasn't that guy in the corner anymore. He was something entirely different, and always had been. The room, so used to noise, had no words. The general continued listing off citations, programs funded anonymously, PTSD clinics opened quietly under Jason's initials, not his name. He spoke of sacrifice, not for cameras or interviews, but for people no one ever sees on magazine covers. He told them that Jason once sold a villa to fund prosthetics for veterans he didn't even know. And all Jason had done tonight was sit there, in silence, letting everyone else speak louder. Until now. Phones lowered. Laughter died. People looked at each other like strangers. What had been funny a moment ago now felt shameful. Ryan stood still, mouth slightly open, a nervous hand half raised like he was deciding whether to drink or disappear. His smirk was gone. His power vacuumed out of the room. The general paused, then turned to face him directly. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't insult him. He simply said the most cutting thing a man like Ryan could hear. You poured wine on a man who's done more for this country than your entire LinkedIn resume ever will. And that was it. No lecture, no spectacle, just a verdict. Ryan tried to laugh it off. An awkward chuckle followed by some muttered excuse about misunderstanding, not knowing who Jason was. He gestured to the sticky note like it was someone else's idea. He shrugged at the room like they'd all been in on it. But no one moved. No one nodded back. Now he was alone. Security was already waiting by the door. No announcement, no force, just a silent expectation. Ryan gave one last look at his group, the people who'd cheered him on minutes ago. None of them met his eyes, not even his girlfriend. She looked at the floor like she wanted to crawl under it. He walked out without another word, and the door closed behind him like a final punctuation mark. The lounge didn't cheer. There were no applause breaks, just an overwhelming silence that tasted like realization. Jason sat again. The note was gone. The wine had dried. The weight of what had happened remained. Near the bar, a young man on crutches had been watching the entire time. He was maybe 22, wounded vet. His leg ended above the knee, and his eyes told stories few would ever ask to hear. He limped over to Jason, stopping a few feet away, uncertain. Jason looked up, just a nod. Nothing flashy. The young man nodded back, eyes glassy, and sat nearby. No words were needed. Just presence. A server, trembling slightly, brought a clean cup of tea and set it down next to Jason. He didn't say anything either, but the way he placed the cup, gentle, respectful, said everything he couldn't. Jason took a sip. No lecture. No victory lap. He hadn't come to win anything. He just came to watch the game. But sometimes the game doesn't start on the field. Sometimes it starts where people think no one is watching, and they were all watching now. A few began whispering apologies into empty air, as if trying to erase what had already been seen. But it was too late. Then the stadium camera panned to the lounge, just a wide shot of the front row where Jason sat quietly beside the wounded soldier. The production crew didn't realize what they'd done. At first, the screen simply read, "Special guests, SoFi Skybox." But a sharp-eyed teen in the booth recognized the face. He zoomed, froze the frame, and then typed the caption that would echo through tens of thousands of voices. Jason Statham, actor, veteran, legend. No music, no lights, just white text on a black screen. In the lounge, people began to rise, not clapping, not cheering, just standing, one by one, out of respect, because now they saw what they hadn't before. And as the camera swept across the stadium, capturing the stillness of a room that had just seen itself in the mirror, a hush spread through the crowd. But back in the lounge, someone else had just arrived, and they weren't coming to applaud. The hush still hung heavy in the air when the second guest entered the lounge. Not military, not famous, just a man in his 60s wearing a brown leather jacket and a cap with faded insignia. He moved slowly, one foot dragging slightly, the weight of time and war carved into every step. Nobody noticed him at first, just another spectator, maybe someone's relative, until Jason stood up. Not fast, not forced, just the kind of rise a man gives to someone who once stood for him. The older man approached, face worn, eyes clear. They shook hands the way brothers do after a storm, no explanation needed. The veteran nodded toward the crowd in the lounge, now silent, subdued, stunned. Then he sat beside Jason, sighing like the moment itself had let him breathe again. The veteran wasn't there for recognition. He was there for Jason. They'd served in different uniforms, on different continents, but in the way that mattered most, they'd fought the same war, the one that never ends when the bullets stop. The war that keeps going in hospital corridors, in therapy chairs, in empty apartments lit by televisions that no one watches. And Jason had been there, when the VA waitlists got too long, when the families stopped calling, when the medals didn't matter anymore. He had shown up, quietly, consistently. He didn't start foundations with his name plastered on banners. He just paid people's rent, funded surgeries, sat at funerals for strangers, and walked old soldiers home when they couldn't walk alone. No one in the room had known, but now no one could forget. The stadium outside erupted as the first touchdown was scored. The glass behind them shook faintly from the roar, but inside the lounge, no one moved. The screens cut to the box again. Jason and the vet now side by side, a generation apart, united by silence and scars. And that's when the real story began to settle in. Not the whine, not the sticky note, not the humiliation, but what Jason hadn't done. He hadn't retaliated. He hadn't demanded apologies. He hadn't named himself or pulled rank or explained anything. He had absorbed on it all. Every insult, every glance, every dismissive chuckle, and given nothing back but presence. That was strength. The kind that doesn't shout. The kind that doesn't need cameras or redemption arcs or viral moments. The kind that just is. And now, the silence in the lounge wasn't guilt. It was reverence. Some tried to look busy. Some checked phones that didn't light up. Some sipped drinks with hands they couldn't steady, because the truth was clear. They had seen a man who didn't need to be seen, and they had missed him. Tessa, still seated alone, looked at her reflection in the rim of her wineglass. For the first time that night, she looked small, not in stature, but in soul. She remembered laughing. She remembered filming, and she hated herself for it now. Marcus scrolled back through his photos, deleting one after another, each swipe slower than the last. Across the room, a middle-aged exec whispered to his friend, "That could have been me." His friend nodded. It was. Even the bartender wiped the same spot on the counter over and over again, as if trying to erase the hour that had just unfolded. And then Tom Brady walked back in. No fanfare, no entourage. Just him. He'd stepped out briefly after the earlier confrontation, not to escape, but to think. And now, walking back in, he looked at the scene, Jason beside the veteran, the room in silent reflection, and offered a nod. Not to the crowd, to Jason. Then he turned to the room, pausing, weighing whether to speak. He hadn't planned to, not tonight. But the moment was no longer about plans. It was about something deeper. "I was going to keep this private," he said finally, his voice steady. "But maybe some of you need to know why he's here." The room didn't respond, but they listened. "You all know me as the guy who throws a football, but 5 years ago, I was sitting in a hospital waiting room. My dad was dying, liver cancer, fast, brutal. I was alone that night. Nothing made sense. He paused, looked at Jason. And then this guy shows up, hoodie, baggy jeans, sat across from me like it was just another Tuesday, didn't ask questions, didn't talk about movies, just handed me a cup of tea and sat. Jason looked away, almost uncomfortable. Tom continued. Found out later his sister was in treatment on the same floor, leukemia. She passed not long after, but Jason stayed, funded the wing, never told anyone, never wanted credit, just wanted families like mine to have more time. He swallowed, voice tighter now. My dad told me on his last day, that man is the only celebrity worth knowing. And he was right. The silence swelled again. But this time it healed. Tom turned back to Jason, eyes glassy. Thanks for showing up. Again. Jason nodded once. That was all. They sat down together side by side in the front row of the lounge. No stage, no speech, just two men who'd lived enough to know how rare real presence was. And as the game rolled on, the cameras caught one last frame. Jason, Tom, the veteran. No smiles, just stillness, quiet dignity. The screen caption read, "Not all heroes wear jerseys." No one stood to cheer. But no one looked away either. Because what they saw wasn't entertainment. It was truth. And the truth had come in quietly, in denim and silence, and left a room full of power speechless. Jason hadn't needed to prove anything. He never did. He just waited long enough for them to figure it out on their own. Never measure a man by the noise he makes. Measure him by what he endures in silence. Because sometimes the most powerful person in the room is the one who never had to speak. Some people demand respect, others earn it, in silence. If this story moved you, don't just scroll past it. Share it, comment below. Tell us, have you ever been judged for how you look? Have you seen someone quietly carry more than the world could see? There are thousands of Jason Stathams out there, people who don't ask for recognition but deserve it more than anyone. So if you believe character still matters in this world, hit like, subscribe, and send this video to someone who needs a reminder. You never know who's sitting quietly in the corner until it's too late to say you were wrong.